Good morning, and thank you for joining How Retailers Are Leveraging CaaS to Grow Fast with Jan Christopher Nugent, CEO of Noggin. As a reminder, if you have any questions during the conversation, to please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Now, here's your host, Deborah Weinswig, CEO and founder of Coresight Research.
Thanks so much, Maura, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. We're excited to have you here with us today. As we look ahead to some of the key aspects of what retailers are looking at right now, they are really thinking about how to take what they've done the past 2 years and kind of move that into, I would say, the next generation of not only their kind of life cycle, but also in terms of spending. And we're seeing this really with mid-size retailers and this need to optimize their e-commerce strategies, especially ahead of holiday. And I think, potentially going into a more challenging macro environment. We've got, giants such as Amazon who've kind of built their own infrastructure, but I really do think that we're seeing it doesn't honestly really matter size as much as more kind of, company DNA, this desire to have, kind of flexibility in a framework. And I think we're going to learn more about that from our discussion with Jan today. And then this, kind of talent grab that we're seeing as well, and having, kind of capabilities internally versus externally. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how a CaaS-based operating model can address, companies' pain points and support the scaling of e-commerce businesses. So Jan, thank you for joining us in a very timely conversation today.
Oh, yeah, thanks for having me.
So as you've been speaking to retailers and brands, especially ahead of what, kind of looks like a more challenging environment, what are you seeing as the kind of key concerns, and what is the focus right now as it relates to CaaS?
I think what we've seen in this sort of early boom cycle of commerce for brands is it's been a very consumer friendly first sort of approach. So everything's been about how do I attract customers, how do I get them to convert, and how do I get them to come back? There hasn't been as much focus on how do I make sure that I, the brand or the merchant, am profitable, right? So you're seeing a lot of free shipping, you're seeing a lot of discounting, you're seeing a lot of pay for returns. And, so when they look at kind of this go forward, it's all about kind of this personalization and targeting. Like, how can I put my customers in different buckets? How can I address their needs where both they're happy and I can present a unique experience that is more profitable to me, as opposed to just following, sort of this Amazon first approach of the lowest price, the freest shipping, the most returns. So that's really what we're seeing them focus on, is how do I shift from growth to healthy growth?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a few board meetings recently, and that has exactly been the conversation. And there's a lot around, really understanding their, not only their own internal talent, but also how to leverage a platform, and it's not really build it or buy it. It's more just kind of, this is where we are. This is where we want to go. How do we get there? And once again, with holiday just around the corner, how do we get there quickly?
Well, I think it's different for different people. I think, what this next wave of commerce has been all about, like when you think about fabric or you think about commerce tools, is about exactly what you said. How do I take what I have, and are there ways that I can sort of bolt on pieces that allow me to further rather than starting all over? With Noggin's intelligent commerce platform, it's a little bit different, where it's saying, hey, you can take your kind of thinner front end and plug it into a full stack e-commerce that has all the bells and whistles and all the R&D, so you don't have to keep going through this recurring cycle. And so I think what you said is right, that it's not size, it's approach. And some who are very IT developer first, they definitely want to build and tinker. And other brands where they're more business first and they're relying on third parties to do their technology, the commerce as a service is a big relief for them.
But I actually think that, I would say, right, when we, from an advisory perspective at Coresight, right, if you are especially if you're a kind of mono brand or your D2C, that is like your DNA, right? Having kind of a, if you will, from a CaaS perspective, to me, we want, right, the retailers and brands to be very singularly focused on their internal DNA. If they can then, partner with somebody like a Noggin on CaaS, it seems to me that's the best of all worlds.
I mean, that's definitely what we've seen. I think that's a really good point. Like, we did recently ModCloth, which was digitally native. We also did Beta Brands, which is digitally native. And even though all the people in the organization were merchants and fashion people, they sort of felt like, well, my DNA needs to be doing the technology myself. But that looked like spending $20-30 million a year to systems integrators and third-party technology. So unfortunately, what happened is instead of them focusing on what they're really good at, their DNA, which is the customer, the product, the experience, they were internally focused on technology, fulfillment. And so, yes, plugging into our intelligent commerce platform definitely frees them up to do what they're really good at. So I think it's a definition of DNA.
Yeah, and I think that's actually an excellent kind of point in terms of differentiation, right? If you're, kind of D2C, and then, a lot of these companies are kind of showing up more in the physical world, just as it is obviously the kind of lowest customer acquisition, lowest CAC. And those are all, once again, are the things that they should be thinking about, as opposed to, kind of their back end, in my own opinion.
Correct.
And I think that the other challenge is, right, we're also seeing this a lot, Jan, which is fascinating. I haven't seen this for quite some time, is that those who are, are not, kind of utilizing a CaaS approach, right, they're starting to do a lot of custom builds, and they just can't keep up because things are changing so quickly.
Correct. One, they can't keep up because the enterprise platforms are really rigid because they're older. But what isn't talked about a lot is that usually 70% of the R&D spend ends up being shelfware. It actually doesn't work, right? Because they try like this newfangled microtransaction thing, and they try to get it to work. And the reality is they can't get it to work. And then the other problem is that they don't know if the ROI is going to be there until after they've spent the $1 million and 7 months to implement it. Whereas with a commerce as a service platform, we're actually testing the capabilities, making sure they perform from an ROI perspective before we are actually pushing them out to our clients. So from that standpoint, you really de-risk, not only by having just a flat percentage of sale that goes up or down if your sales go up or down, but also that you're not spending money that may not actually drive that ROI.
And, maybe as we, kind of look at the next slide, I think this is a more complicated topic, I think, than we had originally thought. And so we've actually been getting a lot of questions from retailers, to be quite honest, on just this difference between, is there a difference between headless and commerce? What is headless? What is commerce as a service? How does, what is CaaS? We've even had people are like, is that content as a service? And so if you can help us kind of compare and contrast, I actually think I like how we lay it out here. Okay. Because I think it helps us visualize, but I think that, if you can help us, kind of with, contextualize some of it as well.
Yeah. So I think if you get into, I'm a tech nerd, e-commerce, the notion of full stack headless commerce is meant to be like Amazon saying, hey, instead of every 3 years ripping out everything you have and building an entire new e-commerce platform because the old one you have doesn't perform anymore, try to build a platform that is only the back end 2/3, give up the front end completely, and then use these future microtransactions that can be dynamically swapped out. That is a highly technical proposition, right? So to truly do what headless commerce is a highly technical proposition. The reason why it's important, though, is because you've got all these people who, like I said, they can't keep up. The sales are slowing down. The profitability is not there. And if their old platform, they can't adapt, they are ripping it out and building a whole new one. And so the ROI is not there. So all we're saying is, hey, instead of paying third parties or doing internally to keep either replacing the 25 pieces or doing something very technical where you add 5 new pieces every year, we've built a fully end-to-end platform that has all 25 pieces. We're going to give you the R&D every year. We're going to test it first to make sure that it works. And kind of like what Amazon Web Services did for hosting. Like, you don't have to buy the servers, you don't have to buy the bandwidth, you don't have to worry about security. You just plug into it And then now you've got the capabilities, you got the user interface to do what you need to do, and then you can kind of focus on your core business of the customer and building product. So that's really what we're doing. Is we're just, if you think about like SaaS plus, like it's the platform, but it's the R&D, so that's always a couple years ahead of the curve. And we're testing it like literally to customers to see if they buy, if they stop returning, if they show up more often with less spend on traffic before we roll out the pieces. So that's the fundamental difference.
That makes a lot of sense. And, as you hear from your clients, your potential clients about some of the challenges they're facing, how do you then incorporate that into, this approach? And, how do you show them that you're really listening?
Well, for us, it's a very ROI driven, sort of concept. So we see the future as these 10 things. We come back and say, our roadmap has these 6 things because we've actually tested them and these 6 actually drive these 4 don't. If you want to separately customize those 4 things, you still can. But this is what we're rolling out. And what we try to do is take away the complexity. Because right now, what you've got is a lot of big business problems, and then somebody trying to buy like a customer data platform to figure out the problem, and then later on try to do predictive analytics to actually act on the problem. Ours is, we actually put a button there that says, if you push this and they come and they buy without giving free shipping, they won't see free shipping anymore, and that saves you 8 full percentage points. Or if you mark it down 30% and normally you give free shipping, now maybe shipping is $4, and that way you actually see the 3% benefit. When you see the traffic, if you spend 10% and you are getting a ROAS of 4, now if you spend 10%, you're going to get a ROAS of 6. And if you don't get it, they yell at us. And so it's a very, the feedback mechanism is very quantitative.
Agreed 100%. And I do find that there is, I think once again, with the increased focus on e-commerce and, I feel like, we were probably at the height of that, I guess almost 2 years ago exactly, but that's continued. And especially as we're going into, I would say, a more challenging macro and operational environment, this, kind of idea around, where are these retailers spending? Where are they getting, like, everything seems to be much more, not only internally, right, much more data driven, but then the other piece of it is also understanding, right, their customers better. Yeah. And so that I find seems to me to be the kind of flavor of the month, if you will. And where are they kind of, investing from a kind of loyalty program perspective, but just truly having a better sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think the hardest thing, right, is if you try to understand your customer from ground zero, it's hard to act on it. If you have a partner like us or Facebook or that has actually defined these are segments that behave a certain way, and then you figure out which one of those buckets your customers are in so that you can access the automated tools that give you an ROI from that, then it becomes more valuable. And so that's another benefit of what we do is actually combining our data where we know how customers behave and allowing them to have a data set that's compared to that so that they know where to put them and know how to act on it.
That's a great point. I mean, as we think about some case studies, I think we've got Lego highlighted here. I don't know if you can, even just take a step back and help us think through, right, as you've gone through some of these journeys, which, I think they, the good thing in some ways they don't end. It's the eternal journey with your clients and your customers. How do they kind of initially kind of have this aha moment? And as they, kind of join this yellow brick road, what is it that, kind of is their really defining moment where they're like, how had we like not utilized this solution before?
Honestly, I think it doesn't really happen until they have a problem. I think if you build it and everything goes great, then you're like, everything's great. It isn't until either growth stalls or you have a hiccup around profitability, Or for some people, they've done it at a company before and they say, hey, I know I don't want to do it that way again. And so we'll see it there. But I think that that's really what it comes down to. I think the market itself, though, forgetting about us for a moment, is at some point you have to look and say, is the R&D required to keep pace with the consumer greater than the profit of the store if we do nothing, right? And that's really the balance, because we've got a fair number of people where the EBITDA for the store is 10% and their R&D is 10%. So it's kind of a zero-sum game. And so there's figuring out how can you actually make the growth of the store healthier so that 10 becomes, say, 20, and then how can you be more efficient with that R&D to where maybe it's only 4, and that 0 becomes, 16% EBITDA, or some version of that.
That makes a lot of sense. And how, so it's very interesting, right? This, significant push, even when you're starting, right, your journey of starting e-commerce to kind of end up either in a physical store or utilizing a physical store inventory. And I would say that as we're, looking at different supply chain issues right now, that this is, kind of top of mind for many executives. As they think more about this, can you maybe talk about some of the, I would say the help from these solutions on thinking through different journeys and different ways to serve your customers that are more profitable?
Yes, I think the exciting thing about the future is the hardest thing right now, at least with what I see, is even if you know the data and you say, oh, okay, I've got 6 different customers and they act differently. To customize different landing pages on every journey, and then if suddenly their behavior slightly changes on a Tuesday versus a Thursday, to then customize that, then to wait 6 or 8 months to see if you're actually right before you tweak it, it's very, very slow. Whereas the future really is, hey, you've got preloaded pages, you've got if-then queries, and it automatically just says, if they do this, send them this. If they do this, send them that on different parts of the store. So customers will not all see the exact same store, right? They'll see an experience tailored to them. The oversimplified example is right now, and one of the things we're working on is we know they're geo-targeting, right? So if you send an email or if you show, kind of the deal of the day, if it's raining in the Northeast, you show them the rain boots. And if it's sunny in Miami, you show them the bikini. Whereas today, that's like, that's 10 or 12 hours of, web development and this, and acting on it. And to do that when the weather may change tomorrow is very, very difficult. So when we talk about predictive analytics, we talk about personalization, it's having platforms that can actually in real time, on the fly, based on these variables, serve that. And that's really, I think the problem is people think customer data platform means I can do that. Right now, no, that's a database that just says, how do I figure it out? Then what is the next mechanism where you can act on it with the merchandising, with the content, with the email, with the traffic? And that's what I'm excited about. I really think this next wave, if that promise gets fulfilled, will free people up tremendously.
And then along the lines from a personalization perspective, we're also hearing, an increased focus on loyalty programs, right? Because if you have a customer and they're loyal and, they are probably a higher ROIC customer than those who have yet to discover you. And so we're finding, especially as we're going to the back half of this year, an increased focus on this aspect. And it may be if you will, a formal/informal loyalty program. How are you helping retailers kind of think through that, and especially along the lines of personalization?
Yeah, I think since the changes in iOS, right, the ROAS on traffic and email has gone down. And so people are kind of saying, hey, how can I maximize my existing clients? We have full loyalty capabilities. And with what we're trying to roll out with our CDP, because we're a little ahead of the curve, what we're really trying to do is, unfortunately, historically, loyalty programs have meant take our loyal customers and give them such big discounts that we lose money on them, because people didn't really have, sort of what is my customer lifetime. And so, you've got them getting 30% off and 40% off and free. So what we're really trying to do is figure out ways to rapidly test loyalty activities that are also healthy growth. Because loyalty, at least with our subset of brands, has been very sort of promo discount oriented. Or the activities have been costly. Now it's trying to figure out what are those sticky activities. So some of the ones is like, it's fun. Like we do virtual raves, right? That started during COVID, where there's some band that plays and we have the chat so they can listen to the concert and chat with each other online. I think that, quite frankly, the metaverse is going to be really interesting. Like if you buy a product, you get your metaverse token. It now gets you into the loyalty club. And if they want to throw, kind of offline sort of functions that people can attend as part of that loyalty. So I think the future is pretty interesting. It's just, where's the ROAS? And that, I don't have the answers yet, other than we're just trying to help people rapidly test and provide very technical things super easy that they wouldn't be able to do themselves.
Yeah, and I think you bring up an excellent point as well, which is, we often see, and, a retailer who's sending out kind of, X dollars off or X% off to their most loyal customers. Well, they're going to shop you anyways, right? That's not why they're coming. They may come to, if they spend a certain level to attain some kind of, VVIP status and what comes along with that, as opposed to getting the discount. So I think that's really important. We do have a question in the queue, which is
cool. And
please feel free, everybody, to drop questions. Can you explain the R&D benefits of a CaaS offering? How does this impact the services a retailer is offering to its customers?
Sure. So for us, what we've found is, one approach, right, is I paid a systems integrator to take my commerce platform, which is just the commerce, connect it to whatever the technologies are. And then every year I'm trying to figure out what new technologies am I going to implement, right, that I think will benefit my customer. Then I'm rehiring that systems integrator to build it, and I'm having to kind of work with them to kind of make it happen. Or I've got an internal development team. With us, our approach is, you're on a fully built platform that, if we're doing our job, is a couple of years ahead of the curve. And you're part of a set of customers who are saying, here's what I see the future as. You've got us, who are very serious technologists, kind of testing what the future is. And then we're delivering that roadmap every year. So you don't have to pay extra as part of your percentage of sale, or however you're paying for it. That's included. And we have a team that actually runs some stores. And so they're actually trying to figure out how to make traffic cheaper. They're trying to figure out how to increase conversion without giving free shipping. They're trying to figure out how to do loyalty without discounts. And so as we're implementing that R&D, we're trying to implement the things that actually have an ROI. So essentially, it would make it so that you would no longer have kind of this fear and loathing of dealing with a third party who's just fee for service and constantly hoping and stressing out, am I adopting the right technology? You'd be communicating directly with Noggin about our intelligent commerce platform, where you think the future should be, and then that's just part of what occurs. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that as we look at this current slide, I do think this kind of focus on, personalized offerings and, kind of recommendations. There's been a lot of chatter on retail media, on, this whole area around kind of completing the look. And, I think retailers are trying to also look at how can they monetize their data, right? It's everything kind of around, right? What they're, kind of the e-commerce piece of it. Yeah. But I think that, they feel that they have, I think they're comfortable for right now in terms of the inventory that they're offering online. And so it's kind of, figuring out how to do more with that. And I think that that's where they need kind of this extension, if you will, of their own team to help them think through that. And also it's what we find is, right, the sequencing, right? So what is it that I as a retailer, what should I do first, and what should I do second, and what should I do third, right? If we're sitting here, in mid-April, and we've got back to school, we've got holiday, what can I do today to really impact tomorrow, and kind of what order do I do it in? I will say we're getting a lot of those kinds of questions because I do think there is still, I mean, there always has been from a technology perspective, this feeling of being overwhelmed.
Of
And I
course.
think that it's, also too, right? I mean, their shareholders are asking more about, these things as well. How do you help them prioritize? Because you can't do everything at once. And, right, because it also needs internal focus.
Yeah, I think for us, there's two different ways, right? If it's a person that we're not doing business with yet, right, it's very easy for us because we go in and we assess. We look at what they have, we look at what we do, and if they're doing great, we say we probably can't help you. And if we see that our approach would actually drive a superior ROI, we say enthusiastically, you should work with us. And then we chase them around begging them. I'm teasing. But so that one's easy. In terms of our existing clients, the reality of the situation is that we run many, sort of upper mid-market retail brands. And so from that standpoint, we see quantitatively all the different tactics across all of them. We turn them into technology. And then, you get the value of all of them. For us, I've always been a big fan, and it's not always the sexiest thing, of what is the greatest impact, lowest amount of time, and shortest time cycle. And that's really the prioritization. There are some things that are like, yeah, that might be amazing in 4 years and it would cost $2 million. Maybe we put that in the bottom of the list. And what you also find, well, what we find is, a technology approach to e-commerce thinks very differently than a merchant approach to e-commerce. So the merchant things are usually very creative, very sophisticated, and they're really exciting. And sometimes on the tech side, there's just a really boring little thing that works. I can tell you, like ModCloth, they had a very loyal customer base. When we looked at how they were discounting way too much. They were giving away way too much. And I kid you not, as simple as having a landing page that said you have 6 customer segments, 4 of the segments still buy without free shipping. They don't see free shipping anymore. The other 2, there's a page that says, hey, it's free shipping, but it might take 12 days. But for $5, you'll get it there within 3 days. That added 5 full percentage points to their P&L.
Wow, that's a lot. That's meaningful.
Yeah. And it's not easy. It's not simple technologically, but the concept is very simple, right? And there were probably 6 or 7 other things we were able to do for them that really got the P&L healthy. So now what are they doing? Now they're spending more on marketing and they're getting to be fabulous again. And the store is killing it because they get to focus being on fabulous, and we handle, kind of the tech nerdy stuff.
I think, that should be the tagline. I love that. Focus on being fabulous.
Right.
But it really is. I mean, it goes back to kind of, I think this conversation has been so worthwhile because, we really want retailers to focus on their DNA of the brand. And, there is right, I would say that the competitive landscape is getting even more competitive right now as there are new entrants, there are entrants who are, kind of expanding into other, price points or, through acquisitions. And so I just think right now is a time where, the idea around headless is it's interesting. We don't often see right tech, right time. It might be right tech, wrong time, or kind of wrong, and I think that to me is what is truly like what gets me very excited about this, because I truly think, and it's from kind of and a lot of the smaller brands that we work with, they're like, this is, we're too small. I'm like, you really aren't, right? I mean, as long as kind of you're profitable, I think that's more important than anything else. Or you can start to kind of rethink your way to profitability. And so I think as there's still a few more questions in the queue, but I think that as we think about it and look ahead to the future, one of the questions is kind of how can retailers figure out if headless is right for them. are there usually kind of like 2 or 3 elements where you're like, I really need to think about this, I need to explore this, etc.?
Yeah, I'll answer this question separate from Noggin. Typically, only a very large retailer who has been hurting their profitability by replatforming on a regular basis would really benefit from headless. Because headless is basically saying, hey, I'm going to stop development of the infrastructure piece of my e-commerce. I'm just going to have my basic, boring, call it the transmission. And I'm going to focus my attention on these newfangled vendors where I will only innovate on little pieces instead of having to rip out the whole thing and start all over again. In order to do that, somebody has to be very, very technical to understand actually what they're getting into. So my answer really around truly headless, this future of microtransactions, is it's really for people who have very sophisticated developers, data scientists on staff. Like I know for me, the first time I ever tried to build a house, it was the scariest thing ever. They're asking me to make decisions. I don't know anything about construction. Now, because I've done it before, when I go to do it, it's not nearly as overwhelming. And when they say things, I understand the context, right? In the context of those who are not that technical, to me, the future of e-commerce, as much as I hate to say it, is how about a really nice track home or a spec home where you could pick out the window coverings, you could pick out the faucets, and when solar's the next thing, they automatically implement it into the house, right? Like when the, tankless water heater comes out, it automatically comes into the house. And I think that's really the thing, because people have gotten caught up in technology as opposed to what's the easiest way to achieve the goal. And that's really, I think, the difference is for us, it's making very complicated things simple for people who are not very complicated as it comes to technology. Headless in its truest form is for people with really sophisticated development and IT organizations. And if they have them, then go for it.
Yeah, I do think that the one challenge that we see from a retailer perspective, right, is they do want that kind of newfangled kind of conversation to have with their shareholders and even their employees. And so I do think that is, as we talked with some of them, it's like, this idea, right? They need to do an NFT just to have, just to kind of make sure that they're in the club and that, their shareholders aren't questioning it. So I agree with you 100%, but I think that, they do need a way to be able to communicate, even if it is in a kind of a CaaS approach, what is it? And they need to also be able to have kind of the internal speak so that they can talk to their external shareholders. And so those, I think, are some of the challenges. And especially, I've heard stories, especially recently, how, their talent is getting hired away and whatnot. But that is, I think, the opportunity, right, to have that conversation externally. I think obviously internally it's absolutely the right approach. But I think those, being for public, well, even if you're a private company, you do have, kind of shareholders in a different way. But I think those are some of the challenges. And I think that this idea that maybe you're able to focus more on, kind of your DNA and, kind of the market and being able to react quickly. And that, you have kind of a true partner, because I think that is truly what we're talking about, right, Jan?
Yeah, now we're getting into the wheelhouse of our side, the commerce as a service, right? So, we would say, right, so personalization, automation, we've had a customer data platform for 2 years, right? We have a full-blown social commerce platform where any of our clients can plug in, start doing QVC online without paying $1 to build it. We have an NFT platform, that's going live, I don't know, in about 4 months, where they can start rolling out without spending $600,000 trying to figure out, a customized NFT platform. So that really is the promise of commerce as a service. What we've found is that the customization that our merchants focus on, because that side of the house is kind of taken care of, is really within their strength. And it's the things we're not necessarily thinking of, right? It's the subtlety of upgrading their photography. It's the subtlety of moving to video if it converts better. It's the subtlety of how they're delivering lifestyle imagery, and is it converting better than certain, we've watched brands literally increase conversion rates 30 to 40% on aesthetics because they have the time and energy to kind of test those things, because with us, all those technology things are being taken care of. But again, to say that there's a difference between I have my current platform, I want to add things like NFTs, and going to full headless with microtransactions, right? So for those folks who want to keep building internally, the do-it-yourselfers, then it's just, I would say, just go lightly, and I think the market's going to force them to anyway, because if it slows down, people are going to be less willing to lose money on customization. That full-blown microtransaction, I mean, it's pretty techie stuff.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So I'll wrap up with that. I know we still have a few questions, but I think that you've answered them kind of along the way, and I feel like the opportunity to really kind of jump in and even help retailers who are because they're once again, as we're talking to companies, right, for the most part, they're in a few different buckets. But there is this, trying to explain, right, if they're moving to a different way of development, and many of them have to just because they lack the talent. But how do they communicate kind of what their secret sauce is to investors? And then as you kind of just hit upon, right, the personalization and customization piece, whether it's for kind of your most loyal customers, whether it's geographically, whether it's kind of taking the inventory component and thinking about we've got, this is what we have. How do we kind of, and we don't have, right, like the hottest seller right now. We're not going to be able to get back in business on that. How do we start to kind of have some of those conversations? And I guess I'm going to ask one last question to wrap it up. If someone is, today, right, if they want to work with Noggin, what's the time frame? How quickly can they kind of, if you will, make that decision and get started just as we're thinking about holiday 22?
No, that's a great question. Thanks. 45 to 70 days. We've actually had $100 million stores that were burning $700,000 a month that we've gotten live in 3 weeks, and then kind of layered on a part 2 weeks later. And with us, there's no implementation fees, so there's no cost up front. So we really try to take away any of the pain so that all the benefit comes on the back end, with the performance.
That's great. I mean, everyone can kind of, I mean, that's incredibly fast and really allows them, I think, to think differently about holiday 22. So Jan, thank you so much. I feel like we always have just scratched the surface. Enjoy the rest of your day. Anyone, if you have any questions, please reach out. We can make the slides available and also connect you with Jan. Thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.